Well, here we are again. Welcome to our second Impact Makers podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about adventures in beverages. So this is your essential listen to find out about the latest products in the supermarket aisles that are breaking conventions and really pushing boundaries or elevating experiences for people.
I mean, it's basically a podcast for supermarket geeks, isn't it, Caitlin?
Yes, and that's a label we happily embrace here. So this is going to be another packed episode. The beverages category is obviously becoming much more experimental. We've got big competitors and small fish. Coca-Cola Creations, for example, we see them being unashamedly experiential and really generating hype while keeping the brand current. They're doing an excellent job of utilizing social media and limited drops to promote Coca-Cola Creations through things like TikTok Shop and different avenues than we've seen before, specifically to access Gen Z.
Yeah, it is all about the hype these days, isn't it? But the problem with hype, of course, is that it raises expectations. And I think, Prime has been in the news recently for being heavily discounted in the UK. I don't know if that's the case in the US, but I feel that essentially that hype created a hell of a lot of expectations over product performance. And whilst, it enabled Gen A to be to feel part of something. Ultimately, the theatre around the product experience was not up to the hype, and yeah, it's a long way to fall. My role, my day job here at MMR, I'm promoting increasingly the idea of consumer packaged entertainment, and it's the importance, I think, for manufacturers now to match that hype with unexpected moments or first used wow, when you use that product for the first time. Packaging rituals, sensory peaks, aromatic hits or amazing sounds or textures. If it ain't there, you just don't cut it these days.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we see that there are ever-shifting trends going on in beverages, and particularly moderation coming to the forefront. So we see a huge growth in no-low beverages as consumers start to more actively moderate their alcohol intake.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of metrics that we could share that represent just how big this growth and shift is. But we already see that this is a category worth $13 billion globally, with a forecast to grow 6% over the next 5 years. It's particularly trending in the US and the UK, bumping up to 15% and 8% respectively by 2027. But interestingly, in Germany, they're expecting a bit of slowdown in this area of moderation to only 2%.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because Germany was always ahead in this sector, the no and low sector. And I think it's a sign, perhaps, that the beverage category is missing the mark when it, in terms of its response to this moderation trend. So, the IWSR, the people you just quoted those figures from, they also say that up to 2/3 of consumers in the top 10 biggest, beverage markets in the planet claiming they want to moderate their intake. And that rises to something like 75% of Gen Z. You can imagine where Gen A will figure out. But, most are not going as far as the no and low. So in terms of the percentage of total liquids consumed as a proportion of alcohol, it is tiny. It's around 2%. And yes, it's growing. And what beverage company can ignore to not to play there? But there's got to be a bigger prize.
And when you say it like that, it does kind of feel like there's this massive gap between what consumers are expressing and what they're actually doing. But I think we're starting to see the emergence of somewhat of a middle ground here. So we've got this kind of idea of middle range alcoholic content by volume. So not too high, but certainly not no or low. We've got flexible ABVs. So we see brands like Gradient coming out with a range of ABVs available in their cocktails and ready-to-drink beverages. Smaller measures also coming through. Yep. So we've got the Drinks Bureau in the UK, who I think are doing about half pours to kind of help with that moderation initiative. And then we even see alcoholic sports drinks coming to play. So brands like Chestnut Sports Club releasing products that have that bit of alcohol, but also a little bit of electrolytes to help kind of ease the pain of the next day.
I have to say, I'm a bit of a fan of these mid-range ABVs. So one of the brands here in the UK is Small Beer. And I think the range is something like 2.1 to 2.8 ABV. And some are being marketed as session ales or table beers because they're much more conducive to, having on the table with food. But I do think in the longer term, this could be the bigger prize for alcohol beverage companies. But right now it's a hidden sector. And I think it's going to take a concerted effort from both manufacturers and retailers to sort of kickstart this third space.
So in all this talk of moderation and no and low, really my beverage of focus at this time of day is that first great cup of coffee. So luckily for us, Harshita Mullick, who's a sensory specialist here at MMR Research, visited the London Coffee Festival on behalf of the Impact Makers podcast and saw so many new and interesting products that are really differentiating in the space. So here's how she got on.
So I've been out to the London Coffee Festival.
Right. So what was the vibe there?
So it was great. And actually, the funny thing that stood out was how much stuff there was outside of coffee.
Right.
Yeah. And funny enough, actually, it was a lot of soft drinks, a lot of beverages, and a lot of drinks around gut health as a whole.
Okay. So what you mean, cold, ready-to-drink products?
Yeah. So these were kind of soft drinks that have been developed targeting gut health, but these were beyond just kombucha. And what I noticed is how many of them are starting to use fiber, as fiber is having a little bit of a moment right now in the world.
Right. You think that, do you? Because I mean, it has been protein for so long now, but you're saying fiber was almost omnipresent at this festival, that it's sort of finally shaking off that stigma that it perhaps has, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Fiber has never been a very sexy topic to talk about, but it's actually making its way in, and people are really understanding the importance of it after initiatives such as Zoe have become super mainstream, and a lot more people are becoming aware of why we actually need fiber in our diet. What we're seeing is this rise of these fiber or probiotic sodas, which kind of have come at a time that, kombucha is kind of trading off. Maybe kombucha didn't have as big of a bang as people thought it would, primarily because it's quite difficult to get your head around if you're not into that sort of flavor profile with the high acidity, the vinegar notes. Whereas the fiber sodas are very clean in the sense that they taste just like soda. There is no taste impact of the fiber on them. So I do see them taking on a bit more of a successful route, maybe, or a mainstream route than the kombucha did.
Yeah, but it was a coffee festival, right? So what did you see in the field of coffee?
So we actually got to try the elusive Magic coffee, which, is having its moment in Australia at the moment.
And it's over here, isn't it? With Marks and Spencer's bringing it over, is that right?
It is, yeah. So Marks and Spencer are bringing it over from Australia, which seems to be spearheading the trend for it, really, in the UK. But it is basically another version of a flat white, using 2 ristrettos instead of an espresso, which means you get a much less bitter extraction and a much smoother coffee profile overall. Okay,
and in terms of the sustainability question, because it is starting to bite in this field, what were you seeing in terms of responses to that?
So actually with sustainability, besides just the compostable capsules and so on, I was seeing a lot around using waste coffee products. So for example, using coffee leaf, the coffee leaves of the tree to kind of make a kombucha with that, or using banana peel in rum to be used in banana peel espresso martinis, and a whole load of these products where you're actually using things that might be going in the bin, the husks of the coffee cherries as well, called cascara, to make a vermouth. So really seeing some interesting products being created with the waste products as well.
And was there a product in particular that really sort of stuck with you from that day?
So it wasn't a product in particular, but it was the way the product has been launched. So Oatly has actually launched a test version of their barista product. So their Oatly Barista milk, which is kind of, all over the place, done really, really well. They've launched a light version, which is 30% less fat. But the interesting thing is how they've launched it. And that is because they've launched it in a white Tetra Pak, which with a huge label saying test version. And what they're doing here is, interestingly, they're collecting data from consumers by putting a short feedback message on the side of the pack saying, tell us what you thought, email this person to tell us if you liked the product or not. So it was just really interesting to see people really adopting the lean mindset and methodology and really launching an MVP without it being perfectly finished.
Yeah, so very much an inclusive representation of that brand there. Thank you, Harshita. Did you get much sleep that night?
I was buzzing for hours after that.
Okay, nice to talk to you. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
Now, Caitlin, you always seem to be travelling. You're always out of office. So I'm rather hoping you've got some really good glimmers or gimmicks for us today.
Yes, the beverage adventure isn't the only one that's perpetual here. But interestingly, we've seen a lot of sensation-based liquids rising to prominence globally, with local cocktail bars at the base and all the way up to CPG heavy hitters like Coca-Cola getting involved. With RTD cocktails exploding in popularity over the past few years, we've definitely seen some of the core classics like a gin and tonic or a cosmopolitan quite easily integrate into the market. Now, as we do see in many categories, no matter how classic is, consumers begin looking for something new and exciting that they can engage in a potentially similar space. Craft cocktail-specific bars have always been the ones on the forefront, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in beverage. And though arguably a resulting physical sensation is probably the core focus of many who imbibe, sensations on the palate are less common. Acmella or Laurasia, also called Jambu, Paracress, and Electric Daisies, among lots of other fun nicknames, is a species of flowering herb commonly found in Brazil and now blooming in cocktail bars worldwide. When consumed as part of a beverage or prior to a beverage, this herb creates a numbing, tingling, almost effervescent sensation that's not dissimilar to a Szechuan pepper. So the drink has been noted to change after consuming a buzz button, altering the palate for about 30 minutes after consumption in a way that your taste buds perceive flavor and taste quite differently. It can often be noted to actually alleviate the burn of alcohol in beverages.
My God, I mean, can you actually speak after you've drunk these products?
You know, a variety of opinions have been expressed, so it seems like the speaking elements stay fully functioning.
Okay, now I know what she gets up to out of office.
So we do see that a Jambu or Electric Daisies will have permanence, particularly in Brazil where they're more of a traditional herb, but we'll have to test its longevity in global beverage. Now, not one to miss out on the buzz, Coca-Cola has also endeavored into this sensational trend with the introduction of Sprite Chill, which many of you have probably already seen on the market. It's varied from Sprite in a way that the company describes as a deliciously refreshing twist of cherry lime to the brand's signature lemon lime taste, which is accentuated by a proprietary blend of cooling agents to deliver a uniquely elevated sensory experience. In order to create this beverage adventure that delivers a strengthening cooling sensation over the course of consumption, the Sprite team actually borrowed technology from confectionery and baking. So it's not necessarily a new technology overall, but certainly a novel application that's allowed it to differentiate from competitors in the space.
And do you think that the Sprite Chill product is ultimately going to be a gimmick, or do we now see it being something more permanent?
I think overall, the sensation trend is a glimmer that will continue to shine, and Sprite Chill is a first product to the scene in that space. So we'll also see expansion here, I think, from the physiological to more of the emotional sensation that you might experience, which you'll have to tune into our next episode called Mood Makers to hear more about.
Yes. Okay, now it's the part of the podcast called The News Moves. So this is where we backpedal on a news story that we think deserves a little extra consideration. And to discuss a news story this episode, we have John Kelly, who is Director of Beverages at Kerry. Hello, John. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Andy. Great to be here.
Now, tell our listeners how Kerry plays in the beverage space.
So Kerry is a global taste and nutrition company that works with beverage customers to develop great tasting and nutritionally optimized products that's very focused on sustainable nutrition.
Now, there is a story that caught my eye. I think it was on the Beverage Daily channel, which was really discussing the tension between the language of no and low and perhaps the achievements of the entrepreneurs within this, pioneering category. So I think the article, it spoke about how many of the words or frames like mocktail, virgin feel very sort of childish, teetotal, something that perhaps not everyone wants to be known as. And even sober has sort of links with being sensible. What did you make of this story, John? Do you think that the industry is getting it all wrong and that we've yet to sort of stumble on the right sort of naming conventions?
It's really good and really topical, and obviously low and non-alcohol is really in growth across beer, across spirits, and now so in wine. And all the indicators are there is that this is driven by consumer demand, and it's sustainable consumer demand. It's only going to go one way, which is up. All those indicators are there. Big companies are responding to it, and from a consumer perspective, no one ever feels like they want to trade down, and they never want to feel that their substitute is a poor substitute to what they have previously or what their friends have if they're having a social occasion, if it's a night out with mates or you've got friends round to the house for it. So that's why as a drinks industry, when the big spirits or beer companies and now wine companies are looking to develop a 0-0 offering, they're looking to ensure that the overall proposition, the liquid, the packaging, the positioning, the advertising is every bit as good as the alcoholic parent.
And there isn't, as you say, a feeling of substitution. The whole backdrop to no and lows is the emphasis is on something that's taken out, isn't it? It's the emphasis is on what's not there. I remember speaking a few years ago to the founder of Three Spirits, and he was on to this, and he felt miffed by the fact that his products were essentially under a no and low banner. He was looking at sort of naming conventions around new wave beverages or something that was a little bit forward focused, futuristic, future beverages. It's an argument that I think is building because actually no and low is still quite a tiny part of the beverage industry.
Absolutely. And as I said, if you look in terms of, I suppose, we're kind of still almost in phase one of this category in the sense that what's being developed are low and no alternatives of the mainstream alcohol offering. Yeah. So, you can see over, to take a couple of examples you've seen, for example, in the Diageo portfolio with the likes of Captain Morgan, Tanqueray, Gordon's. They've done zero offerings, and the positioning and the look and the feel and the product quality is absolutely as you expect from a big multinational spirits company as well. And you see the likes of Heineken 0-0, again, great positioning in terms of look and feel of the Heineken brand. And you can see even that 0-0 now is being used for sponsorship platforms really well. Yeah. So you could see Heineken 0-0 with Formula One, Guinness, and Guinness 0-0 is performing incredibly well.
Good product.
There's actually good product, and they're building extra capex and capacity in the brewery in Jamesgate in Dublin. And they put the success down to the fact that, the product is fantastic and is a premium look and image to it as well. So people don't want to trade down. And I don't believe people who consume 0-0 products view these as poor substitutes for it. And I think it's more about you're positioning this as a equally attractive and equally premium, just alternative offering.
Yeah. And I think also the search for an iconic liquid that, stands up against vodka, gin, rum, etc., but is not a substitute vodka, gin, etc., is still there for the taking. I think, brands like Three Spirits are trying very hard to do that, but that is something that perhaps is part of the second phase, shall we say.
Yeah. And just on the second phase, I suppose what's interesting is that if you think of the 0-0 offerings, people are comparing those to the full alcohol version that they've consumed. But if you look at the much talked about Gen Z's consumer coming in, there's a whole cohort of consumers who maybe have never really drunk alcohol. And their benchmark is not a 4% lager brand or a 30-40% ABV spirits brand. They want something completely new and different. And they don't have a benchmark already. And they're just looking for a really great tasting liquid that is in great packaging with good positioning and is really a great product to have when they're with their friends.
Yeah. Now, of course, every great beverage has a very great flavour behind it. And I know that Kerry, through its flavour forecasting, has a point of view on perhaps the flavours that are going to be trending over the next 12, 24 months.
Absolutely. So every year, Kerry does a huge piece of consumer research, industry research that we publish in January of each year called the Kerry Taste Charts. And that's where we look at the industry in terms of what's trending, what's new, what's established, and what makes, what are the flavors that make great tasting food and beverage products. And we kind of look at them from a mainstream perspective, some of your mainstream citruses for it and what's up and coming and emerging for it. So if you just take an example of, say, alcohol, you could see what still is the kind of the classic and the bedrock of things like orange, passion fruit, lemon, strawberries, that area. And then you move up to what's emerging and new, and you look at things like They could be pink lemonades, or they could be blueberries or salted caramels or prickly pears or lychees or elderberries. But what's interesting is that consumers say, I always want to be hugely experimental and try something new and different, which they do. But at the same time, you know, they want to make sure they like the thing. And, you know, there's maybe a little bit more conservatism in everybody than they want to admit.
A little bit of hand-holding.
A little bit of hand-holding. So what we're seeing is the products that work really well for flavor innovation, that combine something that's mainstream and traditional and something that's kind of emerging. So, you know, that could be something like, you know, you could have a flavored beer that could be a passion fruit and guava. People know what passion fruit is, so they're happy. But guava, I'm not sure, but it's kind of a kind of experiment in that regard. Or you see things like mojitos. So, you know, you might say, well, let's go for a blackberry mojito. It's a bit new and different, but it's, I still feel safe buying, as I have a reference point.
But there's an element of discovery to be had.
So what is working really well in the marketplace is those mixtures, those products that mix a little bit of the traditional with a little bit of new and exciting. And they're the ones that are working well and selling well within the marketplace.
Well, thank you, John. That is fascinating. Now, if anyone wants to access the Kerry taste charts, how might they do that?
Please just go to kerry.com. So www.kerry.com, and that'll lead you to find more information. Or if you want to reach out to me directly, just look for John Kelly on LinkedIn, and happy to help anybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Appreciate your time on the News Moves.
That's great, Andy. Great to talk to you. Take care.
Goodbye. Now, I can't think of a more dynamic category than beverages. I mean, it seems to be accessing all areas, expanding its role in people's lives. We're lucky enough to get some time with Millie Diamond, who is a strategist with Global Trend Forecasters, WGSN. Hello, Millie.
Hi.
Now, what's on your pad?
Well, as you know, WGSN is a consumer-led forecaster. So our forecasting starts with what our future consumer looks like. And our food and drink personas are really each a set of values and needs that are rising over the next couple of years. They're not specific demographic group. So I thought I could give you a couple of examples of our personas and then some products to show you how they fit into those rising consumer values.
Brilliant.
Yeah, for 2026, we have the Gleamers, and this cohort is really fighting back against all the stresses and anxieties in the world. You know, it's a pretty stressful place at the moment. And they are prioritizing drinking for pleasure and celebration. And this doesn't have to be big celebrations. It can be small day-to-day moments. So they're seeking pleasure and restoration, which could be anything from restorative wellness rituals, something like the Sleepy Girl mocktail. I don't know if you've seen that on TikTok.
I haven't, but I know somebody who has.
So we've seen a lot of that, helping people have more restorative sleep. And then things like low ABV aperitif moments, things like the Glitter Spritz Aperitivo, which is from Flash and Post Gin, which is non-alcoholic, but it has a fun iridescent shimmer, which really elevates the drinking experience. And I think that's particularly interesting, especially as consumer eating habits change. They're shifting away from the traditional 3 meals a day to more kind of snackable meals. And the idea of aperitivo plays into that perfectly. So you might sit down and have an aperitivo moment as your little moment of pleasure in the day.
Any others that we should be mindful of?
Yeah, so then we have the synergists who are excited by the possibilities of a more connected world and view technology as an enabler of positive change. So this could be AI, it could be new tech coming into drinks, and they're looking to the future to give them new experiences, and they're looking for things that are boundary breaking. They want unapologetically and authentic mashups, collaborations. So companies like Brightseed in the US are using AI to find molecules in plants that could have health and nutrition benefit, and then these bioactive functional ingredients can then be added to drinks. And then you've got kind of the other side of things where you have Endless West, and they're making a Kazoku molecular sake. So it's inspired by sake, which is obviously a long, slow process involving fermentation. But this is made in a single day and without rice. So it doesn't require any land, any water, any carbon emissions. conditions in the way that traditional sake would. And so it's a reverse engineered spirit with a natural sweetness and aromas of green apple and peach pit and all the kind of flavour profiles that you would associate with a sake, but it's been made in a very tech-led way.
Yeah. So these are a couple of emerging consumer profiles, if you like. In terms of industry trends, what are the things that you think will stand out over the next year that sort of define the innovation spaces over the next few years?
Yeah, so we forecast the rise of the savoury movement. And
right.
This is definitely one of the things that I get most excited about, because there's so many different flavour combinations and opportunities when you step away from sweet flavour profiles. And this is in part due to shifting consumer wellness needs as people look to reduce their sugar intake and live healthier lifestyles. I know you've seen Double Chicken, please.
Yeah.
This is a bar in New York, and they have some incredible savoury cocktails, like a cold pizza cocktail, a beet salad cocktail. And so they're really tapping into these savoury flavour profiles, salad-inspired, meal-inspired drinks, which is really exciting. It's not something that I've seen before.
You mentioned earlier as well that people are looking for these sort of mashups thing. Is that starting to work its way into the innovation cycle?
Yeah, definitely. And we're also seeing kind of boundary crossovers as well with drinks. We forecast this as consumers push for these more complex flavour profiles, as we've just discussed. But it also allows for a more inclusive way of drinking. It's less pigeonholed and it can appeal to a wider range of drinkers. So I'm someone that traditionally doesn't really drink beer or cider, but I like a wine. But if it's something that combines all three, I might be more inclined to have a taste, especially if it's not calling itself beer or cider. So there's lots of co-ferments that are popping up as people try to source more sustainably, either by using what's local to them with things like foraged fruits or ingredients that are bountiful in a specific region, or even upcycling ingredients that are left over from one process they're then putting back into a drink for another process. So someone like Bauman Cider in the US, they use traditional cider apples, but they also use Pinot Noir grape skins from a nearby farm, and they combine that to make this co-fermented drink. And similarly, there's an Afro-Indigenous farm, Mad Marvelous, in Sonoma County.
And really appealing to the more experimental consumer. I think, if we think about it, beverages' basic role in people's lives is often to hydrate. What is going on in that sort of space?
Yeah, we have for 2026 forecast premium hydration, and this really means going beyond hydration for sports and fitness needs and addressing the needs for everyone, from those looking to improve their focus and concentration, people living in warmer climates, especially as the world heats up, or even to breastfeeding mothers. So you have someone like a brand like Needed, for example, who offer hydration support for pregnancy and lactation, and that combines electrolytes with minerals and is sweetened with fruit. And then you have a brand such as Refix. They use a 20% saltwater content, and this saltwater contains mineral salts such as magnesium, calcium, potassium, and it's suitable for daily well-being, so it can support digestion as well as adding those hydration needs. And they come in a range of ready-to-drink flavours. And personally, I drink electrolytes every day now, and I really notice the difference in my focus and my concentration when I don't have them. So I think more and more we're going to see people taking them as standard.
Thank you, Millie. Millie, it's been really enlightening. I hope we can speak to you on future episodes of the Impact Makers podcast. But for now, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've stepped outside the studio, Alex and I. Alex is our producer. And we are in a bar. I saw an article in Marketing Week very recently which said that beverage innovation is hard. Most of the top 20 products over the last 12 months, top 20 new introductions were essentially derivatives, flavor extensions. But interestingly, this same analysis showed that the products that were really kicking it 5 years down the line were those ones that typically started quite small, and they were pretty disruptive. And that's why I'm here with Thomas Gostner, who is CEO and co-founder of Ice9 Drinks, because he's got a mission to shake up the drinks industry and specifically the alcoholic spirits sector. So how are you going to do that, Thomas?
Andrew, thank you so much for having me today. At Ice9 Drinks, we're developing a completely new drinking experience, and we aim to build a new product category in the market. So what are Ice9s? Ice nines are bite-sized ice cubes that are filled with spirits. So if you imagine a margarita, you'd pop it into your mouth and you first taste the lime-flavored shell as it slowly melts with a perfect mix of sourness and sweetness. But then after 9 seconds, that's why it's called Ice 9.
Right. Boom.
The ice cube explodes and liquid tequila comes out in a unique experience. And we can do any flavor combination you can imagine. Like we currently have 5 flavors that we're working with. So we have the margarita, a passion fruit martini, a mojito, pina colada, and a cosmopolitan.
So it all sounds very exciting, Thomas, but what was the need that you identified? Now, was that with the consumer or with the on-trade?
So I think it was a mixture of two observations we had. When we set up the company, we just came out of COVID and we saw the need for experiential products, especially in the food and beverage space. Because everyone was looking for those after COVID, out of home experience that are special.
This is the YOLO economy, isn't it, Thomas? So people are realizing they want to find those experiences that lift their lives.
Yeah, that's exactly what we saw. But then when we look at the market, one of the things we observed was this moment of shots is a very unique moment where people bond and share a drink together. But it's just so, I wouldn't say disgusting, but it's so non-experiential. Like you just have a glass and you just pour it down. It burns. It's not nice at all. And half of the people of this group that enjoy the shots are like, oh God, please, not another one. And that's exactly where we jump in. Like we said, okay, let's make sharing this moment together actually fun, special, exciting.
Okay, I buy that. I think sometimes the idea of a round of shots can send shivers down my spine, if I were honest. But what you are presenting here, you're saying, is something that is more of an experience, something that can lift the vibe for everyone in the bar that night, yeah?
So that is more on the consumer side. Yeah. But then for bars, we saw they're very reliant on the experiences to drive people to their venue. And that's really what we bring to them, like a completely new way to enjoy a drink, a new way to extend their product offerings and ultimately drive sales.
So what sort of reaction have you had from the on-trade and even end users?
Yeah, from the on-trade, we had a lot of excitement around, just the difference of the product. Like it's not just a new spirit, a new liquid for the bar, but it's really a new consumption format that they can offer.
Yeah, and I can see that, bars will be looking for these sorts of formats so they can sort of compete with that sort of elevated home bar that's going on at the moment in people's homes. They need something different to differentiate themselves, draw people out of their homes.
And then from the consumer perspective, I think we really saw the excitement around the experience. Like it's like a party in your mouth. Like you pop it in, you have this anticipation that you build up because you just taste this, the flavored shell. And then when it pops, you just see the eyes widen and it's like, wow. And you get the reactions.
Okay, this sounds like a shared experience and one that I'm actually wanting to have. So it's 25 past 4. I think it's about time we had a try. Thomas?
So perfect, let's try. So we have these flasks that we use to travel around venues and just choke us.
Okay, so this is the cooling flask.
It's a cooling flask.
So you can bring it here today. Yeah.
So it looks like a normal flask, has a little logo on the side, and it has 4 Ice 9s stacked inside, already pre-placed in glasses. Nice. So let's have a look.
So normally in a bar, this would be presumably served in some kind of unit that consumers could see, that they could pick from. Yeah,
exactly. So we have our own freezers that we supply the bars with, which we can make sure that the product is at the right temperature and everything is
nice.
And then so now I open the flask and there's a little pipe in there which separates the cooling liquid from the actual product. So I can pull this little string and out comes.
Okay, so you're revealing the Ice 9, beautiful little sphere.
And then they're in little glass vials with the cork lid. The cork lid has the logo of Ice 9 on top.
Okay.
The spherical ice cubes that have a colored inside, which is the liquid. And now hand over a passion fruit martini.
So I just pop it in my mouth.
Move it around right and left, and after 9 seconds,
boom. Yeah. Well, you know what? I think with the state of global warming, you could see people reaching out for a really cool spirit solution. Yeah, that is amazing, Thomas. That is, yeah, you're right with the explosion. I'm slightly more drunk than when you left.
But I have to say, so it is very strong inside.
It was. I actually loved that one.
I say the passion fruit martini is the one people enjoy the most.
Yeah. The fruitiness of it.
Like it's very, it has a zing to it. But the actual volume, like the ABV is 40% inside, but the volume itself is just 3 ml.
Right.
So it is 10% of a shot in alcohol content.
So you're getting the full strength, but you are getting a small measure, which is not actually off trend right now. As I think you could argue that it's also conducive to the idea of moderating alcohol. So I'd rather have the real thing only in a smaller portion. So, one of the things that we've seen in the marketplace are the launch of ready-to-drink cocktails in smaller denominations, so 150ml, for example, because people would rather have the genuine article, but maybe less of it.
And it is basically, where it says repacking. If you want to push it, you could say it's innovative repacking of existing drinks, where you just repackage it in an ice sphere, and then you elevate the experience through that. Like I said, like it is interesting working with existing brands, especially with maybe very upmarket spirits, because suddenly making them very low in actual volume, you can make them very accessible.
Okay, so Thomas, I have tried the product, but for the listeners who are keen to find Ice 9, where do they go?
Yeah, so we do private events. So if you want to get us in, you can drop us an email or a message on Instagram. It's always Ice9, so ICENINE drinks.
Right.
We are also in 2 venues in London right now that we're trial with, which is the Cauldron in Dalston.
Okay.
It's a bar. And Earth in Hackney, which is more of a nightclub. So we gather intelligence on the different markets. And hopefully we're currently in conversations with a few spirits brands. We'll be working with them in the future to have little pop-ups and bring the product out to you guys.
Well, fantastic. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to find those innovators, those products that are pushing boundaries, breaking conventions, elevating experiences. And I think we've had all of those in the last 10 minutes. So thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
And good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for this episode's Z Factor, or Z Factor, as our next guest from Nottingham might say, Shania Wilson, our resident social media expert and collaborator from our partner creative agency Together, is going to come in to tell us what's hot on TikTok right now.
So I would say Brat Summer. So the idea of Brat Summer isn't TikTok specific, but it's definitely making its mark on the platform. So essentially it's an aesthetic inspired by Charli XCX's album. And you've probably even seen that Kamala Harris got involved. So her campaign social media account has made several references to Brat.
Seems like what's really important with TikTok is quickly jumping on the trend to make sure that you get seen. And I think Brat's easily adaptable design identity has made that a little bit more accessible for brands.
Yeah, for sure. So we've seen brands such as Space NK jump on this bandwagon, but also celebrities and public figures, as just mentioned with Kamala Harris. So brands are doing everything from making their brand colours the same shade of green as the Brat album, using the very simple font, but also doing the Apple Dance, which is a viral song from the album. Plus, Canadian brand Maple Leaf Foods even created a Brat billboard which featured their Bratwurst product, and it was also written in that really simple Brat font.
So lots of variety and different types of brands taking advantage of this trend. What else do you see kind of rising to the top of the algorithm these days?
Nora Smith has definitely made headlines. So she's a creator on TikTok and is married to model Lucky Smith, and her whole kind of thing on the platform is creating food and drink completely from scratch. So for example, she's made Coca-Cola and bubblegum with raw ingredients. She also did a campaign recently with Marc Jacobs where she sort of made a handbag, obviously didn't really make it, from scratch, which was really creative and a very cool campaign.
That does sound really cool. Nara Smith I recognize as kind of the leader of the tradwife trend, so she's really been diving back into traditional roots to make a lot of interesting products, Coca-Cola included, and to see that come to life from scratch is really interesting. Now, in terms of these aesthetics and these kind of products coming to life, we've obviously got different beverages coming into play, so like we've seen with Moon Juice, kind of co-opting that Brat aesthetic and creating the Bratty Lime Colada smoothie as a limited time offering. If we think about other beverages that TikTok is potentially adventuring in right now, what comes to mind?
Yeah, Poppy is a great example of a beverage that's really successful on TikTok. So it's popular in the US right now, and it knows exactly how to utilize TikTok trends and communicate with its Gen Z and millennial female audience. They've also done a huge collab with Chipotle and are responsible for major influencer events. They even hosted at Coachella earlier this year.
Wow, Coachella, that's a big ticket, so they seem to be doing pretty well. Now, using your social media expertise, which brands would you say are doing particularly well in terms of promoting themselves on TikTok and taking advantage of some of these trends?
Okay, well, excuse the plug, but our client account, Don Simon, is also pretty successful on TikTok. So we've grown over 13,000 followers, and a handful of our videos have reached viral status. So the audience is primarily teenagers, Gen Z, and we communicate with them through TikTok trends and memes, which are all really product focused.
That's great. Nice work, Shania. So seems like in addition to getting to things quickly, making sure you're accessible and feeling quite real for our consumers is something that's going to be really important.
Yeah, completely.
Thank you, Caitlin. Always illuminating, especially for somebody like me as a Gen X. So when we come back, we'll be delving into products that claim to shift people's mood. Well, join us for that episode called The Mood Makers, and it's coming up in September. And of course, you can check out all the products featured in our episodes at Impact Makers Pod on Instagram. Oh, and just one more thing. You'll remember that Christine and I reviewed Lewis Hamilton's new Algarve-based spirit in episode 1. Well, it turns out that Pernod Ricard has just bought a minority stake in the brand. Why? Well, they say that it represents 3 accelerating global trends, that of tequila, non-alcoholic spirits, and people's desire for authenticity. I think we can all drink to that. So we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.